Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new episode of the X Button, Season 4, Episode 22/153. I am your host, Alejandro, and with me is no one this time, so back to a solo episode we go. So, thank you everyone for tuning in to this week's episode. We are in the middle of June now, so which is wild. So, 6 months into 2024, now we're in the throes of showcase season. We're supposed to get so many announcements now. This is being recorded right before the Summer Game Fest showcase that's happening on Friday. This is actually, I think, gonna go live on a Friday because of when I'm recording, due to some personal things that kind of delayed this recording a little bit. But yeah, it's like I cannot wait for next week to be able to just kind of like just talk about everything that is announced, whether the announcements are good, if I'm excited for anything for the rest of the year, because the first half has been so strong for me, but I know for others that are a little bit more close-minded that has not been as strong, maybe the second half of whatever they're announced is going to be to their liking. Who knows? I'll try to keep an open mind, but I'm super excited to see whatever's happening over with the Summer Game Fest showcase, the Xbox showcase on Sunday, the UB Forward, and I'll definitely, like, next week is just going to be a recap of everything that was announced there. So look forward to that. And then just as a reminder, this is the X Bottom Podcast, our gaming podcast that posts every Thursdays from 10 a.m. onwards, God willing, available on the YouTube channel Escape Gaming, as well as most audio services around the world, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the like. You can find links and the RSS feed at tinyurl.com/escapegaming. If you enjoy our show, give us a like and subscribe. And just a little housekeeping. My buddy Eric from Overseas Gaming, who has guested before in this show, like twice now, one in October and one in January, he invited me over to his podcast, so we were able to talk about our predictions of what's going to be showing up at the Summer Game Fest and Xbox Showcase, and his episode already went live. I'm gonna, hopefully I remember to link that episode now in the description, so you can kind of go listen to it, because he is gonna join me next week, so we can kind of like talk about how the showcases that we predicted went. We made some bets, we'll see who won, and it's gonna be kind of like a little crossover there. So we did the bets in his show, and then he's gonna read who won in my show. So that's an interesting way to do that crossover, and I like Eric. We love we sometimes have fiery conversations over at the Season Gaming Bitcast when it comes to Xbox versus PlayStation, even though we both play in both. So I like having him here, and I hope that it's a fun time whenever he comes in next week. So yeah, definitely look forward to that, and and I'll definitely have to remember to link that episode. So what have I been playing? Destiny 2: The Final Shape, the culmination of 10 years of Destiny that started all the way back when the auspicious beginnings for Destiny happened back in September 9th, 2014, almost 10 years ago now. It was the most hyped thing, Bungie's new franchise following their historic run with Halo, and sorry, and then a franchise that at the start, even with all its hype, it didn't quite live up to the hype. In fact, people will remember the original Destiny as one of the biggest kind of like disappointments of that year, heading into like the immense hype of Bungie's new franchise, one that is multi-platform, this being their dream game that they had been envisioning for so long. But then something happened. They were able to like set a cadence for the way you launch a game is not the thing that determines whether your game is gonna be successful or not, like in the long run, because they kept working, they kept on updating, they released expansions that reworked the game, that fixed a bunch of the stuff that was not during the game. They took some swings, they hit sometimes they didn't. They would take unnecessary step backs when they shouldn't have been taken, like when they launched Destiny 2 in 2017. They came back from that in 2018 with the Forsaken expansion. Then Bungie secured their independence from Activision in 2019, where they lived in that independence for at least 3 years, as they like made Destiny the most expensive indie game ever in the Shadowkeep and Beyond Light era. And then right in the eve of us getting the Witch Queen campaign in 2022, they then got acquired by PlayStation. And almost 2 years since that acquisition was announced, and we got the Witch Queen campaign, or more like the Witch Queen expansion, which was very beloved. The Lightfall expansion, that wasn't as beloved. You can go listen to my reactions to the Lightfall campaign a year ago when my buddy Sebastian guested in the show, and now we're here with the final shape, the reported conclusion to a story that they say started officially with the Shadowkeep expansion, but it really started all the way back in the first game, based on some of the things that show up in the callbacks that are showing up in this expansion. I have finished the campaign. I finished it yesterday from when I'm recording it. I finished it in Legendary, and all I can say is, unlike Lightfall, where they fumbled, they didn't fumble this one. The final shape campaign, at least from the campaign perspective, it's high up there with the Witch Queen, in my opinion. Like, the Witch Queen is like the high watermark of what they did with Destiny when it came to campaigns, at least from an introductory perspective. Obviously, Destiny is not a game that's defined by its campaigns. It's a live service MMO light where it is meant to keep you like hooked in the long run with like its post game, its end game content, its raids, the activities that happen week in and week out. And before the Witch Queen, the campaigns were always primers, were like decent starts for you to eventually get to the meat of the content, which was always the late game. And the Witch Queen was the first time that they were like, no, let's not just do a primer, let's do something strong right out of the gate. And the campaign of that expansion back in 2022 was so strong that one would say is like it was probably the strongest thing that happened in Destiny in that entire year. And the seasonal stuff didn't quite how can I say this, like didn't quite measure up to how great that campaign was from both a design perspective, a difficulty perspective, a story perspective, especially for a franchise that has always been so hit and miss when it comes to storytelling. There was always kind of like the meme of, does Destiny even have a story based on the vanilla campaign of the original Destiny? And that has long been fixed, but the Lightfall campaign like fumbled the story so hard, it felt like we were back in those like horrible days of storytelling. But yeah, the Witch Queen was like so strong back then, and the big question was, could Final Shape like reach the heights of the Witch Queen, in how much it hit in like all different in all different perspectives and calibers. And I would say for the most part it did, with just like a few caveats. So let's get these strong things like out of the way of this campaign. Bungie has always had a knack of having great art direction and great gunplay and combat, and the art direction of this of the Final Shape is like wild. It is like beyond what they have done previously. It felt like whoever the art directors were, the art designers of this game, like that were cooking this thing, they really got in their element, because there's just a certain abstract nature to the way the environments have been like rendered and composed, with both environments that are recalled to the entire series history for the last 10 years, and the coloring and kind of like how all of that meshes and not meshes because of the abstract nature of what the Final Shape is, which is kind of like a reworking of reality, makes this something that it's really worth seeing, just to kind of see like the imagination and display when it comes to sci-fi. And to me, like, the weirder the sci-fi can get, the better for me. And there's just kind of like a level of imagination here that just like, it's beyond my understanding with how they were able to just cook something that's always so visually sumptuous, so visually rich, that that I'm like, man, it's like they really were cooking with this. And while Destiny has always had a strong gameplay foundation, I would say that the reason that Destiny has endured for the last 10 years, despite everything that ailed it, like to the sides, was just how fun it is to play, how great the gunplay is, how great the different weapons feel to use, especially in combination with the 30-second loop gameplay of grenade, melee, shooting that they perfected all the way back in Halo, and then adding supers with the Destiny loop on top of that. That has always been strong. Destiny over many years had felt a little stale when it came to combat, because there had been no new enemy types for like forever. It took until Forsaken, which was technically Destiny Year 5, if you want to count it, even though that was Destiny 2 Year 2. For us to get like our first, how can I say this, our first new enemy type with Scorn, which it technically was, even though lore-wise it was like, they're modified Fallen, one of the first like creatures you face in this in the series. And even though there was like auspicious way for how this new race kind of entered the game, at the very least it was kind of like new. You had to like at least change some strategies of how you're gonna fight some of the rank and file, how you're gonna fight the bigger enemies, some like the mechanics that they would throw, like how they would tether you sometimes, and then you have to like kind of destroy that tether. If not, it was gonna be like really annoying. But ever since Forsaken, they have not introduced anything new at all. They tried with the Witch Queen, where they introduced kind of like the Light Hive, which was kind of like the Hive, which is kind of like the more quote-unquote scary looking like creatures of the game that are more like alien-y. They introduced a variant of the Hive that could use your supers. So some could do the Titan Shield, so some could like throw the knives from the Hunter, so some could do like the Storm Trance, like Palpatine electricity from the Warlocks. And that at least refreshed a little bit, like already a tried and true kind of like a man. My mind's kind of fried right now. It's kind of like a kind of like an enemy type of the Hive that you've also been fighting since the very first one. But the game has not had a new enemy race almost in its entire 10 years. And last year, one of the highlights of the pretty disappointing Lightfall campaign was how they introduced the Tormentors, which were a race of like big enemies that looked like the raid boss of the Witch Queen. And that at the time it was like, is this kind of like a tease of an entirely new enemy race that we could potentially fight in the final expansion? And when they revealed the final shape in August of last year, they had only revealed two new enemies, which is one that could use stasis and one that could use strength, which were like bigger. And there was kind of like a thought that, is it just this and the Tormentors and that's it? That's kind of disappointing. We thought we were gonna have like a full-on new race to fight. And then something happened between when that reveal was done and then when they delayed the expansion, that in that extra time they were able to then flesh out the entire enemy race, where now you get your normal rank and files, you get like even some flying bat enemies, you get like those subjugators that use stasis and strength against you, on top of like the Tormentors. And then when you see it like all together, you're like, oh, finally we get like a new enemy type to face that actually makes the combat sandbox feel refreshed in a way that it has not felt for almost 6 years, because you have been fighting the same type of enemies over and over, with the only difference being the legendary difficulty that was introduced, or something like they did with the Cabal in Lightfall, where they added like some shield things in their backs that when you kill them, it would kind of like fall and then create like a little shield that can sometimes be annoying. But then other than that, it was still fighting the same new enemies. So that alone, on top of the way some of the campaign levels are designed in the final shape, that helped the combat sandbox feel the most fresh it's felt in a while, on top of you getting to use Prismatic, which is like the new subclass that no one thought we were going to get a new subclass when after Strand. The combat designer or more like the sandbox designer named Kevin Jonas, he tweeted that he was finally done with Destiny, moving over to work over at Marathon over there in Bungie. So everyone was like, oh, so I guess Strand is the end then. We're not going to get more Darkness subclasses. We're not going to expand more Light subclasses. We're going to end with 5 subclasses. And then Prismatic, as it was shown in the showcase earlier, like was it 2 months ago now? Whenever they did like the final shape showcase right before Into the Light, where they showed us Prismatic, kind of like this new subclass that is able to allow you to combine different pieces of all your different Light and Darkness subclass in a way that makes the combat feel more tuned into how you want it to be. And while it starts very limited at the beginning, it's one that quickly earns a few aspects that you can start seeing a little bit of the fun of how interesting it is to, for example, I play a Warlock. have like an aspect that you can use your Bleak Watcher, which is how you create a kind of like a stasis turret, which is kind of like the ice power that can allow you to do some crowd control, while at the same time, if you have your grenade, your storm grenade, which is kind of like for your arc subclass, and you have like a specific exotic that creates an arc soul when you like absorb it, you can create both a Bleak Watcher and have like an arc soul when you throw your grenade. And then on top of that, have an aspect that gives you Devour, which is like a specific warlock trait that, as long as Devour is active, every time that you kill an enemy, you both recover your grenade energy and also you get healed. And then on top of that, having a different melee that can give you Radiant, when before, like, the only way to become Radiant, which was a way to earn more power for your weapons and giving you more bullet penetration for specific enemies. The only way to get that was if you were in your Solar subclass and you did your melee. Now you can have Radiant while you have like maybe your Void Singularity melee, and having all those things like active at the same time like has made me have more fun with the combat that I have had even when Strand was introduced, which I really loved Strand last year. I would say that Strand was one of the most like the most memorable aspects that was introduced in the very disappointing Lifefall expansion, and I would say that Strand eventually, like, it took a while for aspects and fragments of that subclass to unlock, to use it for you to see kind of like the full potential of that new subclass. And I would say Prismatic has gotten there much quicker, especially because unlike Strand, that you had to wait until the very end of the campaign to get the subclass that you can fully customize. And during the campaign of Lightfall, you had to absorb something that would give you Strand like briefly and then take it in and out all the time. This time they actually give you Prismatic. It's as an actual subclass that you equip, and as you go through the missions, it keeps unlocking stuff, and there's even a bunch of stuff to unlock post-campaign. So already there is that variety within it that, while I would say that it doesn't fully live up to like the idea that everything from all the from all the different light and darkness subclasses that you had was gonna be able to like be mix and match. The things that they have brought in really work for me in a way that yeah, this would be usually what I would pick if I was using all those other like subclasses. And this also allows that if you also want to keep trying the other things that also those subclasses have, there is also a reason to switch out of Prismatic. In a way that is like my big fear was that Prismatic was going to become like an all-in solution that was going to make just running one subclass feel completely irrelevant. And I feel like Bungie, at least at this point in time, they've hit a perfect balance where everything feels like worth use. In fact, for the end of the campaign, since I was playing it in Legendary, it reached the point where I really needed something that could give me more burst damage, and because I didn't have my Needler super, which is the super that you get I'm gonna say this with the Strand subclass, that it's usually one of the strongest Warlock supers that exist, even more than the Nova Bomb. And even though I stupidly forgot that I could like equip Nova Bomb, at the end I was like, I need something to kill the subjugators in this like final boss, because this is really hard, and I need something strong, like as far away as I can, because these guys can like suspend me or like freeze me and insta kill me, especially with how quickly you can die in Legendary difficulty. That was the only time that I had to switch out of the subclass for me to succeed while I was playing solo. But I should have also tried it with like the Nova Bomb. Maybe it would have helped me, but I completely forgot. But that's kind of why I like that. There's like my fear that Prismatic was gonna be the one thing, the only one thing that I would want to run forever, has been kind of like alleviated a little bit, because there's been like safeguards in place to make everything still feel viable. So, and also like the new super that they added for Solar, it's actually really good, especially for the Warlock, because it's like the Warlock super has had the Dawnbreak, which is the sword that shoots the sword that shoots that never felt strong, especially against like stronger enemies. And Wall of Radiance had always become kind of like the crutch for like a multiplayer play, where when you're doing like a raid or all that, is like, if you're a Warlock, you need to be running well most of the time if you want to give everyone a chance to succeed and have enough a place where you're constantly healing and constantly having a lot of strength in your weapons. That they finally nerfed that so that you don't survive constantly while you're like in your well. You can become radiant while you're in, kind of like walk in and out of the well now. But it allows you to finally feel like you can switch over to this new super, which is actually really good. That gives a super strong grenade and constant regeneration of, I'm gonna say this, sorry, they can give constant regeneration of your melee, where you can throw a grenade, snap your finger, throw a grenade, snap your finger, and like melt enemies in such a satisfying way. Especially because the ignition that you can get from fire can be super satisfying, especially with how much it like eat at chunks of enemies' health. So I really have no complaints when it comes to the combat design of the game. I know like one of the complaints that I had read in the previous cycle was that there's this new the prismatic subclass has created a few enemies that the only way to break their shield is if you're prismatic, and while you're like wearing prismatic, if you shoot at those enemies, it fills up the meter that allows you to create the prismatic, to activate prismatic, which is when you press the two sticks, where it's like the warlock kind of like does the avatar thing that moves the hands and moves them together, or the titan like punches his hands to become like prismatic. And then when you're in prismatic, if you attack them, it takes the shield out. In the campaign, at least, there's like places where there's these pools where you can kind of stand on. If you're wearing another subclass that's not prismatic, for you to at least be able to do that. So it's like you're not just restricted to being using one of the subclasses. Obviously, the game is kind of pushing you to do prismatic in the campaign that where prismatic is introduced, but it's not like it's completely forced. It's not like forced on you like Strand is in specific places where you have to like absorb the thing to activate Strand. So I really like, so when it comes to like kind of like the gameplay and like the world design, and even something like the way some of the missions are kind of like laid out, and the combat scenarios are less arena based, open, like you're running in circles like they were in Lifeful. So that's already like an improvement. And it also feels like this is the one campaign that fully goes all in and teaching players how to do raid mechanics and dungeon mechanics, because I saw raid mechanics from the last raid. I saw raid mechanics from 2 raids ago, which was the Bow the Disciple, of like learning some of the images that then you have to like learn which image you saw to activate specific things. The Witch Queen sort of did that. It finally felt like it was kind of teaching players at the base game how complex the game could get like in the end game, and they kind of follow up on that. And what you would say, they doubled down, and there's my dog. They doubled down more on that in the new expansion. That I do wonder how it's gonna play out in repeat playthroughs, kind of like, because I like running the campaign 3 times always with my 3 different characters, and I found even more of these puzzles here than I did before. So maybe that could be like some people would prefer how like the Witch Queen had that, but it wasn't always that. There was a little bit more combat. This one at the release, like I feel more the variety now with this. So now as for the story, I'm definitely gonna say that there's pluses and minuses of how you can approach the story of the Final Shape. So I would say from like an emotional standpoint, and kind of like tugging along at the heartstring of, if you've been playing Destiny for the last 10 years, so many elements have kind of come into play, from visual recreations and kind of like some character reunions and kind of like some references that can give you some warmth and fuzzies. As like, man, I've really been like following these characters for this long. The return of Kate 6, who obviously, spoiler alert, that's not really a spoiler because it was plastered all over the marketing. When they killed Kate 6 in Forsaken 6 years ago, that was kind of like a huge tonal shift for the game, and took away one of the more charismatic characters for the series for like a moment of shock value at a time where the game needed something to jolt it up. And how they bring Kate 6 back is in a way that doesn't invalidate his death and actually makes sense for this point in the story, and how much that informs the emotional responses to the returning cast of characters that have been in the game for so long, and also a few that got reintroduced later on, kind of like the Crow, which was the character that killed Kate 6 when he was older and Sov in Forsaken. So when it comes to kind of like it's a way to kind of like what's the word I want to use, to reflect on the 10-year journey. I feel like the journey through the Veilhart Inside the Traveler does a really great job of like reminding you of your entire journey in a way that is not just member berries, but it also works really well in the abstract nature of how they're telling most of the environmental storytelling. And that's the thing that is definitely works the most, especially when it comes to the character of Zavala, which obviously one of the biggest things about Zavala is the fact that his voice actor Lance Reddick passed away a year ago, and he had to be recast with perennial and sci-fi favorite Keith David from Halo and Mass Effect fame, and also the voice of Spawn for those that love Spawn in comics. And there's like a Zavala becomes kind of like a big emotional through line of this campaign, and how much like he's always been kind of like a bastion of hope, a bastion of kind of like remaining steadfast against all adversity. And this is kind of like the moment where inside the Traveler where his faith is being tested, and that and seeing Zavala that's a little bit more frazzled and a little bit more like on edge actually works really well. And I wish life had gone different. We had seen Lance Reddick be the ones that voiced Zavala in this like very pivotal moment. So it can get a little it could take a little bit to get used to hearing Keith David, who was allowed to just be Keith David. They didn't ask him to try to recreate Lance Reddick's voice, and people in the know obviously know what happened, so people can kind of just roll with the punches of real life happened and Bungie had to like adapt. And those are kind of like some of the moments that I'm like it's interesting seeing Zavala in that way, especially because it could sometimes feel that Zavala was always very one note before. He was always really cool. It was kind of like he was our commander, but this kind of vulnerability worked well at this point in the story. The one area of the story that I feel does fall flat a little bit, and it's the one area where I can see people making the argument of why the Witch Queen overall may be slightly ahead in the campaign hierarchy. It's everything that happens with the Witness, which is the villain. So the Witness as a villain is like a really cool looking visual. He's like so unsettling, like how big he can be, and kind of like his like super terrifying voice. How his like design stands at odds with everything else that's designed in Destiny, and like the idea and his darkness power, and how his own darkness is the thing that reshapes your environments as you kind of go through a campaign. That's actually really cool. But other than like the visual and all that, it's like he's just such an abstract villain that it's very hard to feel like you're really connected to like this like humanity ending threat in a way that you connected to the villainous machinations of Savathun when we were leading into the expansion for the Witch Queen, where the entire like Savathun had been like mentioned and seated throughout almost the entirety of Destiny's history, all the way back to like the original Destiny. She started to become more of a prominent figure and mentioned figure around the seasonal stuff following Shadowkeep, and especially during the Beyond Light year, which like all the seasons kind of like culminated into Savathun's appearance, and how much like her appearance and what she did in that campaign and kind of like what it meant for the story really reshaped your understanding of the Traveler and all that. That as a villain, like I feel Savathun absolutely it was much better at antagonist than the Witness was, which was just the Witness as a thing was revealed after you beat Savathun and the Witch Queen. So we've only had like 2 years to really see what the Witness actually is. And the Witness kind of like suffers a little bit of the problem that I feel like Bungie, when they started this thing back in 2014, and people remember just how messy the story was in the original vanilla Destiny, where they had to rewrite a bunch of stuff that was not there originally. And pieces of that original script has like slowly been like reintegrated as like the new expansions have kind of come back into rotation. That it just feels like the concept of the darkness was just something that, you were pretty honest, was just there to kind of give you an enemy to fight instead of being something that was super well defined. That it's taken too long for them to like really flesh out what the Witness is as like a villain, other than just kind of like a massive main threat. That I feel lacking that little bit of a drive of, to put it like back in like, obviously for long-time listeners, they know that I've been more burnt out on Marvel stuff and all that, but since analogies are pretty good to me, like just how like last year I always felt that Lightfall was kind of positioned as the Infinity War of the Destiny saga, but kind of like a fumbled Infinity War, because it's like putting a villain in center stage without us really being explained like how important it was to stop him, because not having an idea like how dangerous he could be. I feel that still plays this expansion in a way where imagine if you had watched Infinity War or Endgame and you had literally no idea about Thanos. Sorry, if you had no idea about Thanos as a villain, or if the movie itself had not really explained the stakes of how important it was for them to like not let him get the Infinity Stones because of the snap and all that. And I feel like Destiny failed to like really tangentially provide you a reason for why the witness was something that you absolutely had to stop, other than you had to stop it because he's like larger than life nature. It's the darkness personified and blah blah blah. That even when you get even some of the emotional moments, like Zavala, like me getting to meet the witness later into the campaign, it just doesn't feel as it doesn't connect emotionally. Kind of like seeing the Savathun being revived by the Traveler and the Traveler giving her the light, and kind of like the tangential nature of the villain. That I feel that really hurts it. But to me, if everything else around the witness, especially in this expansion, is so strong, especially in the things that I mentioned earlier about like the combat design and the environmental design, the emotional hook of seeing like this longtime characters kind of like in such a vulnerable state, while the abstract nature of the Traveler kind of like puts all of that into focus. That anyone that tells me that the Final Shape campaign is probably the best one that Bungie has done in Destiny's history, I do feel that there's an argument to be made. In fact, like moment to moment, like as I was playing through it, I started feeling that. I was like, man, this is top tier Destiny content, and this is just the campaign. I mean, I'm not even like mentioning like how great some of the post quests have been. Like a really cool exotic quest that's focused on Cade and the Crow. It's actually like super fun and super joyful and super soulful, and like and a really cathartic payoff for Crow, the character that originally killed Cade, and then when he got killed and got revived as a guardian, and him having to like wrestle with his past and kind of like his new leash in life. I feel that exotic quest was like a nice endpoint for that character arc, especially for a game franchise like Destiny that's so frazzled by inconsistencies or never following through on the stories like you expect them to, kind of like always having different story arcs kind of going concurrently. You never know which season's gonna touch on what. So it's like there's so much good stuff in this thing that, once again, when Bungie, it's always kind of like between a rock and a hard place, and they feel like they have to really prove something, they usually give their best content. And that was the situation of the Taken King after the vanilla release. That was the situation with Forsaken after the vanilla Destiny 2 release and reception. And I wouldn't say that Witch Queen was that going into Beyond Light. It was just kind of like Beyond Light was like a point of long in the tooth moment. The changes were not like as drastic and they needed something else, and the Witch Queen kind of at least provided that a little bit more. But Final Shape really needed to prove something. Not just as a conclusion for this 10-year saga, but the fact that last year Lightfall fumbled the ball so hard. And that's such a key moment in the franchise's history that they needed to prove something. At the very least, I feel they have. And based on how that final boss has, I do feel that if Bungie really like put all the stops into this, as where from what I've seen with the post game stuff, the raid, which launches when this episode probably goes live, has the potential to be like an all-timer. On top of them saying that there's gonna be one final campaign mission that unlocks after the raid is beaten, that I really need to see like if they're able to like stick the landing in its entirety, even though I feel like they have. And I'm seeing like a lot of online chatter in regards to the Final Shape, where a lot of people are actually pretty positive about it, even though launch day was a complete shit show. This was the worst launch when it came to server stability that I had seen in the game, and lasted for way too long, to the point where there were a lot of people that were playing the campaign where the disconnects were so severe that they were missing really important cutscenes. When that was happening, I was like, I'll play tomorrow. I'll wait. I was looking at Twitter/X. I was looking at the Bungie help and like kind of like the Bungie communications, how they were like being pretty detailed about what they were trying to do to stabilize it. And then when I tried it the day after, everything else was so smooth. And then I played through that entire legendary campaign by myself, and I'm glad I did. And now that most of these servers things have been stabilized, what people are gonna play when they play the final shape is gonna be something that you can really feel the love and care and passion on the screen in a way that reminds people why, despite the topsy-turvy nature of this franchise's existence, like there's a reason Bungie was beloved, especially when they created Halo and they managed Halo and all that. It's like there's a special sauce when it comes to Bungie in art direction and combat design and prowess that really shined in the final shape. And I'm glad it did, because it's like to me, like the final shape was like a prove or die moment in the, do you still have the goods? Was the Witch Queen not the last great thing that you could do with this franchise? Like, is there life after this? Especially after Luke Smith during that showcase mentioned that whenever they finally players get to beat the Witness, they were gonna tell us like what's next about Destiny. Now with like the huge rumors that Destiny 3 is actually really gonna happen now, especially from a desire to finally move to a new file, new fresh start, where they can finally create a game that doesn't have tendrils attached to a previous version of this same game that was not meant to run as long as it did. And everyone kind of like wanting a new fresh start, especially because Destiny 2, I feel like something that this game in particular never recovered from was the fact that when we moved to Beyond Light in 2020, they bolted pretty much the entire first year of content, and then they bolted important chunks of the second year and some of the activities, but kept just a few things there. It's like it's made recommending Destiny 2 nowadays as a thing to play from start to finish something that is just so much considerably harder. And my big hope is that if Destiny 3 is actually like real, what they're gonna do now is, especially when they lifted the restrictions on weapons that they sunsetted, kind of like because they did sunsetting because power creep had gotten out of control, and they kind of wanted to control it and have like a cleaner, fresh slate of weapons because people would not move on from some really good weapons from like those first few years. Now a bunch of those weapons are back in rotation, especially if you had them. I know some people got convinced by streamer and YouTuber data to delete older weapons they had from their bolts. And right was what that was happening, in Bungie announced, oh yeah, we're on sunsetting sunset. Like if you still had all your old weapons there, the caps are no longer there. You can like infuse them and bring them over now, even though there's better weapons now, if I'm perfectly honest. There were like really good ones that have disappeared for a while, that I'm like, if they're unsunsetting that, I would hope that now that the final shape is kind of done, we're moving to this episodes format that's not seasons, that now they work a way to bring back the first 2 years, so that just like Destiny 1, if you go right now, you can experience the majority of that game like as it was released from 2014 to 2017. My hope is that Bungie works to make those first 2 years, which you see cutscenes on at the beginning from like those first 2 years, that they bring all of that back, so that there's an experience from Destiny 2 vanilla all the way to the final shape, and this is like the entirety of the final thought of what Destiny 2 is as like a package. And it kind of, I think that deserves it, because the reason why I don't feel this game was able to grow like I think they probably wanted was that onboarding was just so bad without those important 2 years. Even though if the content in its entirety was not great, you can like talk about how bad Curse of Osiris was or how mixed the reception was for Warmind. The vanilla Red War campaign was well received at launch. It's just the revisionism of the end game not being there that made everyone feel bad about the campaign, but that wasn't badly received. And then the Forsaken campaign side of things was so good. Forsaken is the reason this game is still living, because that was kind of like a very big do or die after a lot of people were so disenchanted with how Destiny 2 ended up going, that the fact that they removed Forsaken to me was unforgivable. Like Forsaken was just such a, I wrote a ranking over at seasongaming.com. One of my first few articles that I did for the site was me ranking the entirety of the Destiny content, and I made the argument that Forsaken was number one, in particular because that was not only for its importance of reviving the game at such a dire state, but the more serious storytelling, like a full feature set of new strikes, new PvP maps, the introduction of Gambit, giving us 2 destinations with the Tangled Shore and the whatchamacallit, and the Dreaming City, the Last Wish raid, the introduction of dungeons, the introduction of an ongoing weekly storytelling. It was like they delivered so much content with Forsaken in a way that it cast a pall forever on future content drops, and a lot of people will always feel how like every other expansion that they got after Forsaken was lesser than the Forsaken expansion, because it's like they really went above and beyond on that one. It feels like they had been striving to reach that high in overall content, even though the moment that game went free to play, it felt like a lot of the things that would usually be reserved for expansions got excised. You sometimes get only 1 strike per expansion, when before we could get 3 or 4. You barely, like, there were no PvP maps for years. We finally got 5 in like the span of 5 years now, which is nuts. Gambit has just been neglected. Obviously, they just recently added Onslaught, which was the Horde mode that was super well received in that dead period in the final, after the final season for Destiny 2. That I feel like Forsaken was just kind of like a historic moment for the game, like a moment where the game was like the healthiest it was, where the vibes were good. There was, it felt like they finally had a handle on appeasing the hardcore that was like demanding stuff. But then at the same time, I do feel that whenever they lost the support studios, Bungie never like really scale up and didn't want to like deliver more content, or the amount of content like they did with Forsaken right out of the gate. I would argue that when you consider like the seasonal stuff as they added like over time and all that, it's not as less of content as people made seem. It's just that because then they embrace so much the drip feed of getting everything week in and week out, whereas in Forsaken it was just like a blast. Not even to mention Taken King, you got so much like from the start that felt different. But I still advocate that they have to figure out a way to bring back year 1 and year 2, just for people to really see the story. I feel like there would be even more emotional resonance for the final shape if the first 2 years were somehow brought back. Especially when they made the case that they would never sunset stuff again 2 showcases ago, in the showcase for Lightfall, if I remember. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to the raid. I'm looking forward to playing more of it. I've always said it. I said it over on Eric's show. It is always scary for me when Destiny content is actually good, because when Destiny's so good, I really don't want to play anything else. That's how much the hold that game has on me, of like how much I like playing it, how much I love living in that game. Is the one live service game for me, a single player gamer, that actually makes me break out of my shell and dive into multiplayer pastures. I've tried so hard to give other kinds of games their benefit of the doubt, their shot at growth, and all of them have failed on me. Avengers failed on me, Anthem failed on me, Suicide Squad failed at the crib. It's basically dead for me now. It's like the Division I tried, and the aesthetic just didn't quite grab me, but at least it had good systemic stuff within it. That it's wild that Destiny really has had that hold on me for almost 10 years, and I never really got off the train with this one. I played pretty much everything with this with this franchise, like from its highs and lows. I've been there. So the final shape definitely has had me in my feels. It's like man, I really stuck with this for like 10 years, huh? I remember when people were making jokes like, this is supposed to last 10 years, and how anemic it was in year 1, or like, yeah, good luck. But look where we are now. So I would say GG's Bungie. I really love the final shape. I think I would rank it really high in my rankings, depending on where it goes. Like, it's still, when it comes to like campaigns, I really want to marinate more, and I really want to see how the raid goes and how the final mission goes, just to see where I ultimately land on that. But anyone that tells me this is the best campaign, I kind of see it. I can kind of see it. Like, they can kind of get over the fact that the Witness kind of sucks as a villain, if I'm perfectly honest. But the design around that is like so top tier that I was hoping it was going to be great, and it has really met my expectations. And I was telling Paul in private that how this goes, I feel this is probably my favorite thing that I played this year outside of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So that says a lot of where I was, because I was super disappointed with Lightfall, even though the expansion, its totality, and the quality of lives of that, I ended up giving a 7 at the time. With how the year went, I would have bumped down to like a 6. Like, just Lightfall was just a massive stumble at a time where it shouldn't have been, and I'm glad that we're at a point where it's not as massive as like they were able to recover from that stumble slowly but gradually throughout the year. I feel Into the Light was the moment that jolted everything back up, and right now the final shape is really on track to deliver some top tier Destiny content. So I can't wait to play more of that. I highly recommend that for anyone that has ever played Destiny before. It feels like a good one to come back in a way, especially if you've had any good experience with Destiny before. I feel the final shape like makes good on that at the very least. So good job, Bungie, and I'm hoping that this year goes well for you, especially as then you make the case for the continued existence of this franchise, and in the eve of you launching a new franchise with Marathon, or not quite new franchise, but your reimagining of Marathon. So enough of what I've been playing, because that's basically all I've been playing. It is time to talk about a few stuff in the news, because like it's actually pretty busy around this time, which is no surprise considering it's showcase season. So press X for some news. We have been only doing a headlines before, but it's time to kind of read more some of these stories, because I feel that they're like a little bit more worth digging into. So, story number 1 by Chris Collin over at BGC. Dragon Age Dreadwolf gets a new name with the first gameplay reveal next week. So, the 4th game in the Dragon Age series will now be known as Dragon Age the Veilhart. The studio has also announced that the first official gameplay reveal for the game will take place on Tuesday, June 11th at 8 a.m. Pacific Time, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, and 4 p.m. BST on the Dragon Age YouTube channel, and will show 15 minutes of gameplay. In a blog post explaining the name change, the game's executive producer Gary McKay said that Dreadwolf title didn't fit with the game's main theme, as although Solus the Dreadwolf will remain the main villain, is the hero and their supporting party who are the most important element of the game. At BioWare, we create worlds of adventure, conflict, and companionship, where you're at the center of it all, McKay explained. As fans of our franchise know, every Dragon Age game has delivered a new standalone story. Set in the world of Thedas, these tales explore epic locales and threats, always thrusting you into a new conflict. Each game also introduces a new lead hero, the Warden, Hawk, the Inquisitor, that you can call your own. You can expect all of that and more with the new game, and of course, much like your unique hero, it wouldn't be a Dragon Age game without an amazing cast of companions, right? Each of the 7 unique characters that make up your companions will have deep and compelling storylines, where the decisions you make will impact your relationships with them, as well as their lives. You'll unite this team of unforgettable heroes as you take on a terrifying new threat unleashed in the world. Naturally, the Dreadwolf still has an important part in this tale, but you and your companions, not your enemies, are the heart of this experience. So to capture what this game is all about, we changed the name, as the original title didn't show just how strongly we feel about our heroes, their stories, and how you'll need to bring them together to save all of Thedas. Or Thedas, I don't remember. Back in March, Giant Bomb journalist Jeff Grubb said that following discussions with his sources at the game's publisher EA, he expected to see the game being shown off this summer. On the potential release window of the game, Grubb added, "It will be released this year, last I heard." EA are pretty confident about that. That doesn't mean it's a guarantee, it could slip, but right now, internally, they expect to release it later this year. So, I want to remind everyone that Dragon Age Inquisition came out last in 2014. 10 years ago. It's been literally 10 years since the last Dragon Age game. Obviously, BioWare hasn't been like sleeping on their laurels since then. Dragon Age Andromeda, made by the Montreal team over at BioWare, was released in 2017. And then the main team over at Edmonton released Anthem in 2019. And obviously we know how those 2 games went. And Dragon Age was like re-revealed back in 2018 by Jeff Keighley. And we've heard many things how this game has been like constantly worked and reworked. It was originally going to be like a live service game that got canned. Then it was going to be like a multiplayer game, another live service that got canned. Then it was going to be like a single player game that the combat was going to be closer to something like, how can I say this, that God of War 2018, like an over the shoulder like melee combat. That was the last thing we actually saw of the game, kind of like in gray box format in 2020 during the last EA Play. EA doesn't do EA Plays anymore because they barely have anything worth showing. They just kind of give their games to other showcases nowadays. And they're mostly like a sports thing also when it comes to EA. So this has been a long time coming. It's like Dragon Age Inquisition. It's so funny. Like I was talking with my bud Sebastian and Paul in kind of like a joint group chat, and people really forget that Dragon Age Inquisition really was 2014's Game of the Year. Something that, in hindsight, when you look around the games that won Game of the Year around 2014, or kind of like the last decade of games, when then you see the list and you see that Dragon Age Inquisition was the one that won, a lot of people kind of scoff at it and be like, how did that won? Because it's like, it's not that it was a bad game. There's like a lot of great stuff in it, but it was also a pretty flawed game that is kind of... It's not one of those that when you think about it as a Game of the Year contender, there's like more flaws in that game than the game probably like needed for it to kind of like have like high watermarks. And obviously I feel Dragon Age as a franchise doesn't have the strength of BioWare's Mass Effect franchise, even though Andromeda like dropped the ball so catastrophically hard for the Mass Effect franchise that it sunk to lows that Dragon Age never really did, even when people don't really like Dragon Age 2. But when it comes to BioWare, it's like BioWare has been like in need of a win, and obviously this has been long percolating. They re-announced Mass Effect in 2020. There's like rumors that after this is done, it's gonna then take them like 5 years to do the next Mass Effect, so we may see it until 2029, which is nuts to think about. That I feel like Dragon Age really needs this. EA needs this win, especially for BioWare, because they have lost so much key talent from BioWare over this last few years. They have absolutely lost... BioWare is no longer a name that inspires like quality, especially after what happened with Andromeda and Anthem. That even though the Legendary Edition for Mass Effect, which that BioWare released itself, was really well regarded, really well made. I really love what they did with the original Mass Effect. That it just feels like a BioWare is still not some... It's like they lost their luster so hard that this is kind of like a make or break moment for them, that I really hope that this constant redevelopment they did with this game eventually pays off into something that really pleases people. And I'll be rooting for it. As I was telling kind of Sebastian in private, is like, this has been an incredible year for JRPGs and kind of like indies, or more like left field surprises. That the more traditional AAA Western development has kind of been pretty dire this year, and I would want more wins in that side, because I don't... As much as I love my Japanese games and my Weeb games, it's like a healthy industry has great games from both East and West, and are just not carried from by one or the other. It's like the diversity and the health of the industry depends on a healthy serving of two sides. And 2024 has just been a serving of Japanese stuff, and I like that. But it's like some people are really close-minded to really accept Japanese style games, as varied as those games are, where you gotta like action RPGs, turn-based JRPGs, a fighting game, open world games. It's like there's so many different strategy games. It's like there's so many different flavors that have come out of Japan. A weird JRPG action and action hybrid of Dragon's Dogma also is like, it's been quite like everyone that says that this is like a light year, it's just if they look at from a very Western centric perspective, because it's like it has been anything but quiet, but it's been definitely quiet in the Western development side. So if this, and whenever they reveal this gameplay showing on the 11th, and whenever we may hear more stuff, it's like this could be one of those like games for people that only love Western developed games to have something to latch on about. So I'll be rooting for it. I always like to remain optimistic for developers that I used to love before. And I'm hoping that this becomes a big win, because it's like there is a reason EA still hasn't closed BioWare when they could have easily done it after 2 massive flops. So let's hope this is not kind of like a third strike, you're out. Hoping for the best for you, BioWare. Now, story number 2. This is now moving over to the PlayStation side. Funny, it's a funny quote, but it's something that needed to be said. It was a story by Chris Collin over at BGC. "We will not be the Last of Us studio forever," Naughty Dog's Neil Druckmann says. So, Since the original release of The Last of Us in 2013, the studio has released a total of 6 separate The Last of Us titles, including 2 separate games, a DLC spin-off, a remake, and 2 remasters. Druckmann also executive produced The Last of Us TV show, as well as writing and directing some episodes. A second season is coming in 2025. However, despite the success of the franchise, Druckmann has told the Los Angeles Times that it will not be Naughty Dog's sole focus going forward. I promise you, Druckmann said, we will not be the Last of Us studio forever. Druckmann also said that numerous games, including multiple single-player projects, are currently in development at Naughty Dog, but stressed that while they won't all be The Last of Us titles, they will have a similar goal. We create experiences that are steeped in story and character, especially relationships, he explained. The stories have some sort of philosophical core that everything is going to revolve around and feed into. Druckmann was recently involved in a situation with Sony in which the company misquoted him. Last month, Sony published an interview with the Naughty Dog designer on his website in which he was quoted as saying that his next title could redefine mainstream perceptions of gaming. Druckmann then took to social media to claim he never made such comments, and published that he claimed to be what he claimed to be his unredacted words in full, suggesting that Sony's version was heavily edited to the point where context was lost. Last week, Sony removed the interview due to what it called significant errors and inaccuracies, apologizing to Druckmann for misrepresenting his words and for any negative impact this interview might have cost him and his team. So, since restarting the show in 2021, in that very first episode with Paul, I even said it. I thought The Last of Us Part 2 was my game of the year in 2020. Was a super impactful game for me. It's like messy in spots. I feel the first game told a more clear, heartful, and concise story that at least kind of like kept things simple. Whereas the second one went messier for bigger swings and more like emotional hits. That I understand why people don't like it, but it's a game that really resonated with me. But then there's my dog. It is something that I have been saying it, that the subject matter is kind of so heavy, and the way that The Last of Us is kind of pimped out so much in critical circles, in comparisons and all that, despite there only being 2 games, even though they remastered the first game once and also remade it, and then we also got a remaster of Part 2 this year, which I reviewed. I liked that remaster quite a bit, especially the content they added, especially from the lens of just paying $10 for said remaster. It was like I really like their no return mode, and it's kind of like as a showcase that people don't give Naughty Dog's gameplay designers the credit they deserve from a combat perspective, because they have really improved with each game. I have also felt that this constant pimping has led to this desire that I want something new from them. They intentionally ended Uncharted at the peak of their game with Uncharted 4 at Thief's End, and then the expansion turned game Lost Legacy. Uncharted is still something that apparently Sony still wants to do. It was part of like a franchise in the global, in the world-class franchises they had at the slide that I talked with Ains when I had him in the show. Was it last week? I don't remember how long ago that was. That I feel like Naughty Dog, who used to be one new franchise per PlayStation console generation, going from Crash Bandicoot in the original PlayStation, those 3 games, then the Jak and Daxter games in PS2, the Uncharted trilogy on PS3, and then them including The Last of Us right at the tail end of that generation that went 1 year longer than it should have been. So I could have seen a scenario where the PS3 generation had ended around the same time that all generations used to end after 5 or 6 years. The Last of Us would have been like their opening salvo for what should have been like the next console. That's why the existence of the remaster on PS4 feels to me more like less the PS3 swan song, but more like the franchise that's more PS4 centered, because that's where like that franchise really grew, because the PS3 was still very how can I say this? I lost my train of thought. Sorry, I've been like sick. So it's like because it's been more of a PS4. PS4 is where it grew more. That I feel it is just time now that we're on PS5 for them to prove that they can do also something new. And also because I feel like because of this constant like parading of The Last of Us, especially now that it has become so big that it has become an Emmy-winning TV show that's actually pretty good, even though it's a show that started strong and petered off later. I feel it's just time for them to prove that they still got the stuff in something new. God, my dog is like really annoying the fuck out of me right now. and distracting me. But yeah, so it's like coming from the horse's mouth of, hey, we have multiple single player projects and we're not gonna be the Last of Us studio forever. I feel like in most of the conversations that Naughty Dog and especially Neil has been having, it does feel like they understand kind of like where the smell of blood is currently, and their next game is probably gonna be the new IP. We're not gonna get Last of Us 3 immediately from them. I feel like our Last of Us fix is gonna be through the HBO show, which recently got confirmed to be the season 2 is gonna be 7 episodes instead of the 9 that comprise the first season. But that was also kind of like also announced as they're gonna cover the second game in multiple seasons, which makes sense because that game is way too long. It has a lot of content and a lot of important content I would add that I feel like it can be done in multiple seasons. In fact, I remember people saying that if the first game felt like playing through one prestige season of TV, like the second game felt like binging 5 of those in a row. So it's like at the very least, The Last of Us will be taken care of like in the TV side. I'm dying, pun intended, to see what the reaction is to certain moments, especially if they recreate the beginning of that game. And when they do it, I can't wait to see how the general population that's not the gaming population reacts to certain developments of that game. Because it's like, I feel it will be better received here because this isn't a network that gave them Game of Thrones, a TV show that prepared them for the unexpected, basically, and letting go of established conventions. And I'm really curious to see how people react to that, because it's like the way people still are so salty about how the big twist at the beginning of that game was handled, or like their reaction to that thing, really makes me really embarrassed by some gamers and their lack of maturity when it comes to this kind of stories where these things are kind of expected. That I feel like the reception in the TV show will be better because we've seen like the reactions to things like Game of Thrones in a way. So at least I like I mentioned, it's like I just feel Naughty Dog, their fumbling of them wanting to do the factions multiplayer, which was only supposed to that originally was gonna be a mode for Last of Us Part 2. Then they got too ambitious and they wanted to make it like its own game, and then eventually reaching the point where it could have been a live service, that if they have gone through with that live service, it would have transformed that studio into becoming like a live service perpetual thing forever. Is like and I'm like, you didn't know that when you were doing that game. It's like they deserve grief for that because it's delayed them so long that it's like, yes, they have multiple games in development. It's like, will those see the light on PS5? Could they only do one new thing? And then the rest of this generation was just our Last of Us remake and 2 remasters with Uncharted 4 Legacy of Thieves. Uncharted Legacy of Thieves collection that had 4 and Lost Legacy, and a remaster of Last of Us Part 2. Is like, I know that Naughty Dog is usually considered the top of the line PlayStation studio, but the way everything has been going for them during in the PS5 generation and the things that have actually come out or not come out from them is like makes that prestigious claim about that studio like feel more in question, especially next to Insomniac that has literally carried them. Even people already know my thoughts about Spider-Man 2, but objectively it's like Insomniac really has like hold the fort for that for this entire console generation. And God of War Ragnarok was great, but it was a cross-gen game, and it's like now people are like wondering what's next for Sony Santa Monica. So it's like if they show up again, then I could actually make the case stronger for Santa Monica and Insomniac being like the top tier Sony studios currently. Unless whatever new thing Naughty Dog puts out, it blows everyone out of the water and reminds them why they were considered the most prestigious team in that stable of studios. Remains to be seen, but I'm thankful for Neil Druckmann mentioning that they're just not gonna be that Last of Us studio. It's like, I would have hated that, because it's like there's just the pretentiousness around The Last of Us, not from its creators but for the people that adore it. I understand where Paul kind of comes from that case, even as someone that actually likes those games. That pretentiousness just gets tiring, and I would love for them to prove that they can do and bring their strengths into something really new. Don't just be stuck here. So, can't wait to hear whenever we see about that new Naughty Dog game, however long that takes. Story number 3. Does stay kind of like in PlayStation land a little bit. Story by Tom Ivan over at BGC. It looks like PlayStation's new shooter Concord could be priced at $40. So, Sony's upcoming PS5 and PC shooter Concord could be priced at $40 in the US and £35 in the UK, as spotted by Reset Era user via Push Square. Ahead of pre-orders going live on Thursday, the Australian PlayStation Store is listing the standard edition of the game for $60 Australian dollars and the digital deluxe edition for $95 Australian dollars. The standard edition and Super Citizen edition of Helldivers 2, another Sony published PS5 and PC live service shooter, also carry these price tags in Australia. In the US and the UK, the Helldivers editions are priced at $40.35 and $60.50 respectively, and Concord's Australian pricing could translate similarly. Concord's Digital Deluxe Edition comes with 3 days of early access, 16 character skins, and a Monarch pack. Sony revealed the first Concord gameplay footage, which was poorly received by YouTube viewers, that's putting it mildly, and a release date for the game last week. The debut title from PlayStation's Firewalk Studios will be released for PS5 and PC on August 23rd, with a beta taking place in July. Concord is a 5v5 team-based shooter where players compete as free gunners and have to take on opposing teams. The game will add new cinematic vignettes every week, so players can learn more about its characters. I've never seen a new first-party Sony game being as negatively received as Concord has been. I feel like Sony absolutely fumbled the way that this thing was revealed, from a trailer that showed absolutely nothing last year at last year's showcase, to them revealing this thing with like a really impressive looking cinematic trailer that gave a vibe of like, whoa, we've heard this is like a live service game. This is gonna be like a 4-player co-op thing as you do missions with your thing, before like smacking us into the reality that this was a 5v5 hero shooter in the vibe of Overwatch, at a time where Overwatch right now has like lost so much popularity, and Marvel Rivals is so Overwatch looking but has IP that people actually really care about still for some reason. This is Marvel. That is like, it felt to me that Concord needed its beta that they announced for July. They needed to launch it that same day. This feels like the kind of game that when you look at it, it looks so generic in a way that you need hands-on time. This is the kind of game that needs players to, if it's good actually, especially, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's good, because the talent within it is actually pretty good. They have like some Destiny and some former Call of Duty and Destiny people working on this thing, especially the guy that nailed the controller feel for Destiny, Josh Hamrick. He's working on this thing, so I expect that to feel really good on a controller. This is the kind of game that, similar to Helldivers 2, word of mouth may save it. But the difference is that Helldivers 2, at least there was like mild interest, there was like no negativity really surrounding it. It was just kind of like something that was kind of arriving that no one expected was going to blow up like it did, and word of mouth really helped there. Concord already has such negative word of mouth based on those trailers that right now this game needs to be paraded. This game needs to be like put out there, show it to people, have people get hands on, especially if it's good. That's the only way that I see it surviving, especially because at a $40 price tag, if that's the price that they're going for the live service games in lieu of trying to go the free-to-play route, I'm like, Helldivers 2 proved it worked. And the thing I like the most about Helldivers 2 is that even though it has post monetization, it's like it doesn't feel as egregious and in your face like many live service free-to-play stuff, because usually like those things are so in your face because they're giving you the game for free and they have to recoup their investment somehow. So at the very least, there's like some buy-in with this thing, and them saying that they're gonna unlock all 16 heroes if you buy the game for $40 is like, at least it has that. But the beta will tell the tale when it comes to Concord, because it's like I kept saying it, it's like I feel like as much as I love Sony's third-person over-the-shoulder cinematic pretentious HBO crap, a lot of those games are pretty good despite their pretentiousness. I have been lamenting the lack of variety in that library, especially compared to Xbox, where even though the quality has been more inconsistent, the outlook of them having such different kinds of games feels better, even though the quality is still not there. Sony's still beating them in quality for like what's actually put out there. But obviously, there's also preference in critics liking that kind of game more than like what Xbox puts out. So, but that's a subjective conversation for another time. I do feel like Concord is a game PlayStation kind of needs just for like so much needed variety in that in that library. I'm hoping it's good, but it feels like it's like stumbled right out they get in this announcement, and I'm hoping for the best for that beta. If impressions of that beta are not good, this thing is DOA, and will be pretty crappy for a game that for a studio that Sony literally just purchased recently. Why did it purchase it? Was it just pressure for Microsoft just literally gobbling everything else in the game industry? Who knows? But my hope is that them buying this studio means that they have played, at least Herman Hall's played what was there, and he believed in that. If not, it will look pretty bad for him. So now we move over to story number 4. This is still the most bizarre game in existence, but I still love the fact that it exists. So, story by Chris Collin over at BGC. LEGO Horizon Adventures will be announced this week, it's claimed. The game will reportedly be available on both PS5 and PC on day one. A LEGO game based on Sony's Horizon series will be announced tomorrow at the Summer Game Fest, it's claimed. The name LEGO Horizon Adventures was first leaked last month by ex-user Kurakasis, who said it would be announced at the next PlayStation State of Play, but that they didn't know if it was a game or something else. When the State of Play came and went without an announcement, some believe it may have been a false information, but Deadloop's writer Bilbilcon, who has a long track record as a reliable insider, has now stated that it is indeed a game and the reveal is coming on Friday. According to Bilbilcon, LEGO Horizon Adventures will be announced during the main Summer Game Fest presentation, which starts on Fridays at 2 p.m. Pacific Time, 5 p.m. Eastern Time, and 10 p.m. BST. They also believe that according to the information they have, the game will be released on both PS5 and PC on day one, as opposed to the typical staggered PC release most non-live service PlayStation games get. A PSN account will be mandatory on PC. Bilbilcon also claims that pre-orders for the game will open immediately after the announcement is made, but that the release date isn't yet known. The game will reportedly be an action-adventure game which can be played solo or in co-op, suggesting it may be similar to previous LEGO games, and will also support cross-platform online co-op. The insider also says the game will have in-app purchases, but it's not yet clear how they will come into play. This isn't the first time the world of LEGOs and Horizon have crossed paths. LEGO released a tall neck from Horizon Forbidden West back in 2022. Horizon has this interesting thing where even though there's two main entries, one that came out in 2017 and one that came out in 2022, two entries that I both loved. I think I love Zero Dawn a little bit more than Forbidden West, even though as much as I pimped Forbidden West in the lead up to that to that release, I still enjoy the game. It just didn't stick with me. I feel that it's interesting how we learned that they were trying to do a multiplayer spin-off for Horizon. There was going to be like an MMO by NCSoft. There's supposed to be a TV show done by Netflix. There is a remake of the first game, which is like dubious, I would say. And I was always wondering about like the multiplayer game. And I do wonder if this LEGO Horizon Adventure is what that means. If it's going to be like a 2-in-1 scenario where if all those reports we heard of them, some of them trying to like spin up like a multiplayer version of this thing, doing it like in LEGO form would be kind of like the way to kind of keep the sanctity of the Horizon franchise, which recently stumbled with the VR title for PSVR 2 that happened at launch for that device. That I'm just curious to see what the pitch of this game is. I had heard before this that it was supposed to be kind of like a reimagining of the original game, which maybe still is, maybe it's not. The Horizon franchise is such a beautiful franchise. It's so fun to play, but it's so devoid of personality. It's like other than Aloy and maybe Aaron, the dude with the mustache, is like and the character and Silence played by Lance Reddick. This is a franchise that I tell you, people, I struggle hard to remember. I struggle hard to remember its like minutia. I struggle hard to remember its characters. It's just something that it's a franchise that feels like candy. It's really delicious candy. It's beautiful candy, but it's candy nonetheless. Once the sugar high is done, it's like it doesn't linger in the mind. It's like a junk food in a way, despite the amazing technical prowess and display. So it's just something that I've always found curious about Horizon, even though like as a franchise it has sold 32 million copies combined, with like some 23 million on the original game, both on PS4 and PC, and like 8 million of the Forbidden West, which was both a PS5 and PS4 title. Obviously, it is interesting seeing kind of like the although to be fair, is like Horizon Zero Dawn has had now 6 years in the market versus Forbidden West has had 2. So it's like the time frame is really not that comparable yet to see to really to make an argument that it's a franchise in decline. It's just so funny how many people really bought that original game, in a way that Horizon always feels kind of like a forgotten stepchild in gaming that is always like as great as it can be, is always overshadowed by generational defining games all the time. That even the DLC that happened last year that I really enjoyed, I even forgot to include it in like a top 10 or anything because I forgot it even had come out that year. It's just that kind of like franchise that just doesn't linger. So maybe in Lego form it could be the thing that makes it stand out, who knows. But the thing is that I wonder if like all these characters in Lego form will even resonate, because it's already so hard for this cast of characters to resonate in the first place. So it's very, very, very interesting times. This does seem like a funny announcement for Keely's thing, so we'll be, by the time you listen to this episode, like Summer Game Fest will be happening at that time, so you'll know if it's true or not. I'm super curious about it, just out of morbid curiosity. So, and now a final story before we move to quick headlines. Rocksteady is reportedly working on a Hogwarts Legacy director's cut. Story by Tom Ivan over at BGC. Studio also planning to pitch a new single-player game following Suicide Squad flop, it's claimed. So, Rocksteady Studios is currently helping to develop an unannounced Hogwarts Legacy director's cut. That's according to a new Bloomberg report charting the troubled development of the studio's live service flop, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, on which the parent company Warner Bros. Has taken a $200 million loss. An insane loss, by the way. Weeks after the title's disappointing launch in February, Warner Bros. Games boss David Habbard reportedly visited Rocksteady's London office to deliver an update on its plans for the studio. Haddad is said to have used an all-hands meeting to inform staff that the company wanted to do more collaboration between its dozen studios, which also include TT Games, NetherRealm Studios, Monolith Productions, Warner Bros. Games Montreal, Avalanche Software, and Warner Bros. Games Boston. He said Warner's Games business was relatively understaffed compared to other publishers, and that it wasn't planning to cut jobs at Rocksteady, which, parenthesis, really good news considering that at $200 million loss, I think they could have justified like completely shuttering Rocksteady after that, because that's a lot of money to lose. But, end of parentheses. According to Bloomberg, a large number of Rocksteady developers are currently working on a new version of Hogwarts Legacy, which has sold over 24 million copies since its release last February. The Harry Potter spin-off, which was 2023's best-selling game ahead of The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, received a free summer update today, which is today when this story came out. Following the Batman Arkham Studio struggles in the live service space, it's claimed that Rocksteady leaders are also planning to pitch a new single-player title to Warner Bros. Games. So, obviously, this was a, how can I say this? This is the expected Jason Schreier expose of him going, putting on his journalist cap and going straight into the source and like trying to learn what the hell happened with the development of Suicide Squad, and hearing the story of what happened to Suicide Squad is like exactly the exact same thing that happened to Anthem, and it's hilarious that a lot of the single player studios that went down the live service route is like their stories can literally be copy and pasted from each other. It's like wild that everyone made the same mistakes, everyone made the exact same like dumb decisions of not learning from their competition to I can say this to make sure they actually got this thing right. But the good news that happened from there, other than the fact that they're working on a director's cut for Hogwarts Legacy, which is weird, is that they're not gonna be laid off. Even though they lost their key leadership team in Sefton Hill and the other guy that left that made that new studio that Xbox is helping fund, that I kind of mentioned last week, it's still kind of funny that one of the things that they're going to be doing immediately afterwards is working on someone else's game. I'm really curious what this director's cut of Hogwarts Legacy is going to be. Is it going to be like a free DLC? Is it going to be like another full full-size release game. I have been on the record of being really impressed with what Avalanche Studio or Avalanche Software, or whichever one of the two was. No, it's actually Avalanche Software, was able to do for Hogwarts Legacy, considering their last game had been like Disney stuff, like Disney Infinity and the Cars 3 game. That was a game that really pushed above its weight. It was a really fun open world RPG that, for fans of Harry Potter, obviously we heard the side with Sebastian that he was so adamant about like the respect of lore and all that it didn't work for him. But then someone that I liked the movies, I enjoyed the movies, seeing it recreated that way at such high production quality and level was like super impressive for me, especially for when it was coming from. And I thought the game was pretty fun, and obviously was buried hard in the year that it came through. Obviously, Spider-Man 2 got all the accolades for a licensed game at the end of that year, and there's many elements of Spider-Man 2 that are definitely better than Hogwarts Legacy, even though Hogwarts Legacy for me was like a more I had more fun with Hogwarts, if I'm personally honest, because I had so much disappointing I had such disappointing moments with Spider-Man 2 personally, with like that game's stability and that game's story, that I do find I'm just interested to see like what is Rocksteady gonna do to a director's cut of this thing. It is funny to hear that apparently like the free update shot Hogwarts Legacy up to the top of the charts over in the UK already again, which is like it's not even a new release. It was just people wanting to buy that game again, and it's like a Harry Potter like mania is still like hard, and like the fervor for Harry Potter is still like bright and burning, which is wild considering like the controversy surrounding its creator and author. So either some people absolutely don't care, or they absolutely are capable of separating the art from the artist. So, but I think it's good news for Rocksteady that at the very least they're letting them to pitch. They're being allowed the opportunity to pitch a new single player game to Warner Bros. Games, especially after they had said that they wanted to commit to more live service stuff. It's clear that they see that if they want to do that kind of game, they're just gonna lose catastrophic like amounts of money. And Hogwarts Legacy proved that they didn't need to do that. It's like Warner Bros. As a publisher is one of the worst ones in the industry right now, because it's like it's being run by absolute morons at the top. So that's why I'm like anything that comes out from them, I'm always kind of like skeptical. But at the very least, it came from out of the horse's mouth. That is like, you guys are already understaffed. Like compared to other stuff, we're not gonna keep cutting you. We still see value in you. So where that means a lot of these studios are gonna kind of like cross-develop games nowadays. We'll see. Maybe that's kind of like what they want to do. That maybe instead of like one studio like solely working on a game, which led to 5-year development cycles, 8-year development, and 9-year development cycles, like what happened with Gotham Knights and Suicide Squad: Kill the Justice League. Maybe this is the solution. It's like, okay, we might have to double up on, okay, Rocksteady, WB Montreal, you're gonna work together on something, because we need to get some of these things quicker. So we'll see, and I can't wait to hear more about Hogwarts Legacy, regardless of like what a lot of the liberal media will say. So, and with that brings us to the end of the news. But now let's read a couple quick headlines that speak for themselves. So, headline number 1. Jeff Keighley says people are setting themselves up for failure when asked about Kingdom Hearts 4 at Summer Game Fest. So, one of the most interesting things about the lead up to this year's Summer Game Fest has been that Jeff Keighley has been like sort of sandbagging the event a little bit in a mild way, not completely, because obviously if you sandbag this, like it's you admitting that it's just crap and you don't have to waste time on it. It's just more like, this is the most I've seen him want to like keep expectations in check about like what's not gonna be there. And obviously Kingdom Hearts 4 has been like a strong topic of conversation recently, like within fans of that franchise, because now that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is out, and development of the third part of Final Fantasy is supposed to like start in earnest. Back in 2022, Tetsuya Nomura like put out a letter when they revealed Rebirth, where he mentioned that he was not directing Rebirth in particular, but he was gonna come back for the third and final part of that trilogy. At the time, it was easy to understand like what he meant, because Kingdom Hearts 4 was announced 2 months before, and obviously Kingdom Hearts is his baby. So if development was gonna move in earnest for Final Fantasy Remake Part 3, there was always the question. Then I was like, okay, did plans change? Is Nomura still attached? Is Nomura still going to fully lead that from a directing perspective, or is he? Did also things change where it's like Naoki Yamaguchi, who solely was the game director of Rebirth, did such a great job that maybe they're just gonna give him the third game at the same time, because he's still gonna work in Kingdom Hearts and he can take forever sometimes working on a specific franchise. Because of this conversation, a lot of people have been like, okay, now that Rebirth is out, what is next for Square Enix, especially post Dawn Trail? Dawn Trail is out in like 4 weeks from now. So with that in mind, is like, and Square Enix kind of like, how can I say this? Square Enix kind of like slimming themselves down to kind of like their big tentpole franchises, considering like their recent financials, and Kingdom Hearts being kind of like in that high tier franchise for them outside Final Fantasy and maybe even Dragon Quest, where we still have to hear from Dragon Quest 12. Is like, when do we hear it next? When the Steam announcement for the Kingdom Hearts games happened a few weeks ago, Jeff Keighley kind of like tweeted kind of like some like frowny faces and all that. So it's like, anytime that Jeff Keighley interacts with something in social media, it's always like pregnant with meaning. And when that happens, it's like a lot of people like reading a lot into that. Especially when it was mentioned about like that Yoko Shinomura tweeted something about kind of like some of the soundtracks, and then he put like some eyes. It's like he had been Keighley had been interacting with the Kingdom Hearts world a little too often, that then a lot of people were like, there's smoke, so there's probably fire there. So obviously he is basically now saying, no, there's nothing there, but it's like he brings that onto himself based on like the things he does or doesn't do in social media. So will Kingdom Hearts 4 be at the Summer Game Fest? I'm gonna be inclined into believing the man in a way, but I know there's a lot of people are like inhaling the copium of, no, it's just misdirection. It's just gonna be misdirection, because I know that for Rebirth, like, if everyone remember, in the lead up to Summer Game Fest last year, Square Enix started to do like a 7-day tease where they were tweeting something for like 7 days, and their last tweet coincided with the Summer Game Fest of last year, and that's when they had the trailer, the big trailer for Rebirth last summer. And that was, and Keighley didn't kind of like even he didn't wink or not that was gonna happen, so that was kind of like as a surprise. So maybe he's really trying to surprise people, but he even mentioned something that there wouldn't be like a one more thing in this thing, and he even went to say that, no, this is a light year for the industry. And I'm like, you cannot call 2024 a light year in the industry unless you're so myopic of looking at everything from like a Western developments lens. But it's funny seeing like the Kingdom Hearts fans. They're a wild bunch right now. They're like antsy. They just want, even though it's only been 2 years since the game was originally revealed, but I can believe that a lot of them have the trauma of like waiting for the mainline entry 13 years apart from between Kingdom Hearts 2 and 3, despite the importance of all the Kingdom Hearts games that happened in between that period. So they could have really called Kingdom Hearts 3 Kingdom Hearts 6. I tell you, like, they could have maybe like Kingdom Hearts 3 is a PSP game, Kingdom Hearts 4 is a DS game, Kingdom Hearts 5 is the 3DS game, and now this is Kingdom Hearts 6, because at the end of the day, when you play Kingdom Hearts 3, it's like all those things are like so important that is like you still needed to play all of that. So, but then I know there's a lot of people that don't really know that, and they just thought about, oh yeah, it's just Kingdom Hearts 2, and man, I waited all this time for the new one. So they're used to like waiting a long time, and we'll see whenever we hear more about the new one. To me, the thing, while I'm excited about Kingdom Hearts 4, I'm more excited for Final Fantasy 7 Remake Part 3, whatever it ends up being called. I just want that entire remake trilogy to be finally done and exist in modern form. And just me knowing that it's Tetsuya Nomura that was specifically mentioned, he was returning to the Rex, it's like, I get more anxious about that thing not making a potential 3-year development cycle, because I'm still putting my money that the third part will release in 2027, especially when the bulk of the development of this game was done like in 3 years, and a lot of the big map is basically done. So, and they had made already they made the case that the development pipeline they put through this remake and their focus is how they were able to get it out so quickly, all relatively considered, So I'm more concerned about that. So unless they come forward and say, hey, no, Nomura is no longer going to be the game director of part 3, and Naoki Yamaguchi proved his worth, he can handle the third and final part. That's like the only thing that I care about, if I'm perfectly honest. So that's, keep your expectations in check, Kingdom Hearts fans. So, but at least keep 1% hope alive, because maybe Jeff Keighley can troll you. He loves trolling you sometimes. So, headline number 2. Crash Bandicoot 4 developer Toys for Bob announces publishing deal with Xbox for its next game. This one is interesting because Toys for Bob was an Activision studio that came in with the purchase of Activision Blizzard. But during the round of layoffs that was happening, it was like announced that Toys for Bob was going to be like let go of the Xbox Game Studios families for it to exist kind of like independently. There was like talk that during the layoff period, they laid off a few people from Toys for Bob and they closed their studio, but a lot of the studio was still like remote. And it still kind of like existed, and instead of like closing Toys for Bob outright, they kind of gained their independence. But in that independence, they were also gonna have their next game like be published by Xbox, which means that Xbox is gonna provide the marketing budget. They're gonna like show it up and all that, but they don't control the existence of Toys for Bob, because like they could have easily been closed. Like what happened with Tango and Arcane Austin and the other 2 studios that I forget the names of, on this new era for Microsoft, where there's like more the Eye of Sauron all over them. That this is like the best case scenario for that studio, if I'm perfectly honest. Of like they get the security of like the first party of Xbox in a way, but they're not a first party studio. And I'm really curious to see what their next game is. They did such a great job with Crash 4. There were rumors that they were wanting to do like a new Spyro game. When you think of the Spyro collection, that was so good. It was such a great remaster. It's like I would have loved to see what a new Spyro could be outside Skylanders. So maybe they bring that back up. Who knows? But I'm glad Toys for Bob exists. It's like I need more of these kinds of studios to deliver the quirky platformer mascots type of game that fills my heart with so much warmth. Like, there's a reason why I love the Astrobot trailers so damn much. That's my most anticipated game for the rest of this year. I need more of those games because it's like the world is too pretentious, people. Way too pretentious. So, headline number 3. Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater might not release until 2025, it's claimed. So basically, it had been claimed that Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater was earmarked for sometime later in 2024, but once Silent Hill 2 got its October 8th release date, it's like, okay, where would Konami like insert a Metal Gear, like a Metal Gear release? And with no updates to Delta, like either at the State of Play, even though the last time that Delta was shown was at an ID at Xbox thing, despite the original reveal of Delta happening at the PlayStation Showcase, with no words, is like, unless, and here's also the fact, is like, anyone expecting this to show up at Jeff Keighley's show doesn't understand that Jeff Keighley is such a simp for Kojima. He's such a good friend with Kojima that Keighley has like big resentment against Kojima over what not against Kojima, against Konami over the treatment Kojima received from MGS5, that he's not gonna carry them, like he's not gonna like carry water for that company. He basically burned the bridge. So, and let's not forget that the day that Metal Gear Solid Delta was announced, hilariously, like Jeff Keighley kept like tweeting at them, be like, "Oh, who developed the game? Who was the original creator of the game?" So it's like he was like very, he was kind of like a scorned lover towards Konami and the treatment towards Kojima, that there's no way that they show it there. Maybe it shows up at the Xbox Showcase this Sunday. There's apparently rumored that showcase is gonna go for like 2 hours and 30 minutes, which is nuts. That's too long. But they have enough content that they could pull that off, if I'm perfectly honest. So, we'll see. I'm excited to see if this remake of Metal Gear Solid 3 is any good. Visually, it definitely looks better, but there's a certain dryness to it that I'm like, would it still have the same charm as the game that I can literally play right now with the Master Collection on my PS5? It's like, and it still plays relatively well, even though its survival mechanics can be really annoying. That's why Metal Gear Solid 2 is still my favorite Metal Gear. solid game. So we'll see when we see it. I can't wait to see who is the one that shows it. So next headline. The PC adapter for PlayStation VR 2 arrives this August with a $60 price tag and some drawbacks. So there had been a PlayStation blog recently like revealed that they were looking into making the PSVR 2 function with Steam OS games, since the Steam library has a lot of VR games that are not on PSVR 2 on console. So, and with the absolute dearth of PSVR 2 games, other than some tiny stuff that sometimes is released there, like a lot of like evangelists for VR, like telling people, oh yeah, it's there's more games that you give it credit for. And obviously a lot of people really focus on the fact that Sony has done a piss poor job of supporting it from a first party perspective outside of the Gran Turismo 7 update for VR and the Horizon Call of the Mountain launch game, which was not very good by many accounts. It's like they had said that it's like, yeah, if you're feeling like you need to use this VR for more stuff, and since we barely have any games, we're gonna try to make it work on PC. And lo and behold, they announced this dongle that you can plug into your computer that will make the VR work on PC with most of those games. Though the drawbacks in question is like a lot of the features that make the PSVR 2 so unique, from like this haptic feedback in its controllers, its eye tracking and all that. That's so unique to that headset, and a lot of the games made for Steam VR were not made for that. So it's like you would play PSVR these VR games with PSVR 2 with nary any of the extra functionalities that make that device so cool for the people that have it and like high tech and impressive. That it's like a monkey's paw scenario. It's like, oh yeah, the best way to get all these features on PSVR 2 is with the PlayStation 5, but there's barely any PS5 games for it. And PSVR 2 is like selling so bad that they stopped producing because they want to move all their units. That is like, does this thing even have a future? Is what I keep saying with Sony and outside peripherals that are not like main PlayStation consoles. They are really bad at supporting them, because it's like, for some reason they always launch something like parallel to like a main PlayStation console, but first party will always just keep focusing on the main PlayStation console. So it's like, because there's no first party support and those like side stuff, the third party stuff sometimes is not as strong because they don't see the main guys supporting it. So it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy, which is weird. It's like to me, is like, I personally wouldn't mind if PSVR 2 just kind of goes away. Every time that we see a new state of play or PlayStation showcase that tells us tune in for more updates on what's coming to PS4, PS5, and PSVR 2, I always see the PSVR 2 chunk of those tiny showcases or the big showcases as kind of like a time waster, because like I don't have one, so it's like that's less games that I could potentially be interested in. So that's kind of like my thing. But at least for the few people that bought the PSVR 2, at least this is a way to use it, even though MetaQuest 3 with its complete wireless thing and its power is it's like a more appealing thing. Like Meta is actually supporting VR in a way that's actually legit. They feel like they're running away scot-free with support with that thing. So now the next headline. I'm really excited for this. Kena Breach of Spirits guides players to Xbox in August. So basically, Kena Breach of Spirits was the AAA indie that came out in September 2021 for PS4 and PS5, and that kind of like first year of the console's existence. This was kind of like that Pixar-looking game that married God of War, Dark Souls combat like kind of together in a way that was so cute. It was so wholesome. It was pretty hard sometimes, and it was such a visual tour de force for like this art house studio that was their first official video game, and an art house studio that previously developed the Majora's Mask CG short that's like so impressive. The visual quality of Kena Breach of Spirits rivaled that short in a really impressive way. And after Kena Breach of Spirits came out, it's like there has been no news about Kena other than like an update that happened within a year that I think added New Game Plus or something else. I know that I was kind of like hoping that they were gonna fix the parry timing of this game that is like so tight, and made a lot of the late boss battles of this game really hard if you didn't quite nail the super narrow parry timing of that thing. So it finally being on Xbox, the more people that can play this thing, the better. No announcement of Game Pass, so I hope people really put their money where their mouth is and support these things. That's been always the narrative when it comes to games that happen over on Xbox. Like Xbox has trained a lot of their people to not buy games because it's like everyone's always the hope. If I'm a Game Pass subscriber, eventually all these things will arrive in Game Pass, and I'm like, if you want more games to come to your platform, buy them. It's like get into the healthy habit of, yes, it's cool when you get stuff over in Game Pass, but if there's something that you're interested in and you want it to be in that ecosystem of your choice, just buy them. So I'm hoping that Xbox players really turn up for this one, as little as it can be. I just wouldn't mind for that game to have a second leash of life and show like interest for like a potential sequel or something else for that team. I really love Kena. It was my third favorite game of that year, if I remember, behind Guardians of the Galaxy and Hitman 3. So really great stuff with that one. So now the next headline, Yooka-Laylee, the platformer game that was kickstarted, that was like a spiritual successor to Banjo-Kazooie, is getting a remaster called Yooka-Replay. So basically, there was like a Guerrilla Collective, which is like an indie showcase thing, where that happened today. I didn't watch it, but I got to see some of like the quick headlines, and this was the one that stood out to me. I was like, oh, okay, they're doing a remaster 7 years later when Yooka-Laylee came out, and they redid a bunch of the graphics. There's like better fidelity. They said that they improved the controls, which that's good news because especially the camera was pretty wonky with that original Yooka-Laylee. And they said that they were gonna do another live stream pretty soon. To let me see, I'm looking at the when are they doing that? Yeah, also in June 11th, the same day that they're doing the Dragon Age live stream, where they're gonna detail a little bit more how they've improved that original game. I love the second one, Impossible Lair, a little bit more because as a big Rare fan, I was a big fan of Donkey Kong Country, and Impossible Lair really felt like the Donkey Kong Country I remember falling in love, despite not having the aesthetic of Donkey Kong Country. So anything that can improve the 3D version of Yooka-Laylee, that was more the Banjo-Kazooie thing, it's like music to my ears, but especially with a lot of Xbox fans still like screaming for the return of Banjo-Kazooie, who has not seen a modern entry since the Nuts and Bolts game in 2008 that a lot of people hate. So now we get to the next headline. Octopath Traveler 2, the HD 2D JRPG that came out on February of last year, that kind of got buried basically, and only launched on Switch and PlayStation, despite the original being a Switch and Xbox game. The second game is now available on Xbox, and it was also shadow dropped on Game Pass alongside the return of the original Octopath 1 that used to be on Game Pass and then left Game Pass, and now they're both on Game Pass, and they're going to be there on Game Pass until January of 2026. That's actually pretty good that we can learn a little bit of the timing of how some of these third-party games, how long they're going to be in that kind of service, because a lot of people can sometimes get comfortable like, oh yeah, it's going to be there on Game Pass, I don't need to play that. But if you kind of know how long you have for it to be available to you, basically lent for free, at least now they know they have like a year and a half to play both of those two games. But also at the same time, they shadow dropped the first game on PlayStation, both PS4 and PS5. To me, it was insane that Square Enix was like, didn't have the foresight of releasing this game, the original one, on PS4 and PS5 before launching the sequel on PS4 and PS5, and expecting people to just jump into the second game like no problem, even though they were justifying. I was like, no, it's not a real follow-up to the first because it's different heroes that you kind of follow. But I'm like, there's an Octopath 2 in the title. The people didn't learn about the Titanfall 2 thing, where Titanfall 1 didn't come out on PlayStation. It was only Titanfall 2 that came out on PlayStation. That game didn't sell well over on PlayStation because it's like the first game wasn't there. It's like something you need, like you cannot skip entries if you want like sales on those platforms. So it's like it's interesting that they just shadow dropped that out of nowhere yesterday. But hey, Octopath 1 and 2 are finally both on Xbox and PlayStation after being like strong Switch games too. So the art style of that game is really beautiful, and their soundtrack is succinct. I love the soundtrack. When Octopath 1 left Game Pass, I actually bought it for like $30 over on Xbox. But I bought Octopath 2 on a sale on PlayStation. Now Octopath 2 is on Xbox, but I'm kind of like a little bit of a bind here because it's like I love trophies more than I like achievements. I feel JRPGs work like they're more at home on on the PlayStation ecosystem than in the Xbox ecosystem. To me, the Xbox ecosystem is the Western RPG platform. Kind of like that's why I'm playing. I have a Cyberpunk save there. That's where I'm gonna play that game. So that's why I'm like, it's $40 right now because there's like a PS Plus sale for the Octopath 1 currently, and I'm just I'm debating because I'm like I already bought it on Xbox, but it's like I would like to have both 1 and 2 on PlayStation for like trophies stuff. I'm just weird like that, and also kind of like my preference. I remember telling someone, it's like I love my franchise associations per platform, like Tom Clancy games. Those are Xbox games for me. First-person shooters, the majority of them, those are Xbox games for me, with the exception of Destiny, that I started playing that on PlayStation, and it had been bought by Sony. Kind of like I already defaulted that as kind of like PlayStation's shooter for me, even with its multi-platform kind of like perspective. So it's a good way for me to kind of like keep both systems at play for me. So we'll see. I have a lot of things to kind of consider. Next headline. Remedy looks set to reveal Alan Wake 2's Night Springs DLC at Summer Game Fest. This is kind of like no surprise there. Like Jeff Keighley and Sam Lake are like this. They're together to reveal Alan Wake 2. 2 years later, Alan Wake 2 won a bunch of awards at the Game Awards, and they had the mid-show performance with the Old Gods of Asgard, where they did the song of The Amazing Moment from Alan Wake 2 of the musical. They got to do that on stage. Even though kind of like what made that song more impressive is the fact that it happened while you were playing the game. So seeing it perform live didn't hit the same way. Even though it was fun seeing Sam Lake kind of like perform, just like he performed in Alan Wake 2. But hey, the DLC is gonna hopefully release it soon too. It's like I've been looking for a reason to kind of revisit Alan Wake 2 because this was a game that I was mighty impressed with last year. If you remember, people, I gave it a 10 over at Season Gaming. I called it historic for what it did as a medium pushing thing that combined FMV and gameplay and cinematic kind of like all together in a way that didn't forget that it was a video game instead of kind of like a recreation of Hollywood. And that's the thing that impressed me the most. But it's also a game that I haven't also thought of revisiting like recently, so kind of like my standing of that game has kind of like diminished as time has gone on, and other games that I rank lower from it when we did the top 10 I think of higher, like for example Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, I think even more higher now, like after its year anniversary, and just thinking about that experience. So it's like, that's what's funny about time, people. Time sometimes changes opinions and feelings of games, but I would like the Night Springs DLC to be kind of like that big push for me to like return to Alan Wake 2, because I remember having a really great time with it. So, and the final headline for this week's episode of the X Button, Like a Dragon Jaxus is getting a live action series on Amazon Prime Video. This one was a weird one because it randomly popped at night on Monday when I was recording the episode I was doing for Eric's show, and I saw my notification. I was like, what in the what? They're doing a live action show over on Amazon? That's interesting. Obviously Amazon is like kind of like on a roll with like video game adaptations with the Fallout TV show. That was so great, according to many people. The last Amazon show that I watched was The Voice from them and Invincible. I still haven't seen Invincible season 2. Like that's kind of like slipped by me. There's so much TV that I need to catch on. Even The Acolyte, I started watching the first episode and fell asleep, and I'm like, should I really watch this week to week or just wait for the entire season to be out and just play video games? Who knows? It's like TV is kind of, it's piling up for me, and I don't know if I want to like stop playing games to watch TV. Maybe at a time when I burn out. Like during a tiny burnout period, I was able to catch the X-Men 97 show, and even with my current hatred for Marvel, X-Men 97 was actually really excellent. So sometimes, like, you never know the kinds of things that could hit, even when you're burnt out and stuff. So I'm curious who's really developing the show. Is it gonna be a Curious show? Is it gonna be an Ichiban show? The poster that they revealed for Like a Dragon Yakuza was felt more like a Kiryu game. It's gonna focus more on Kiryu, because if it had been Ichiban, they would have had him with the afro. Who knows? But Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth is one of those games that I bought. It's kind of there in my queue, and I'm just waiting for the mood to strike for me to go through it. I heard it's also pretty long. I kind of want to give Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth a run, because I know a lot of people like pitting that game with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth against each other as kind of like games that were similarly like huge JRPGs and expensive JRPGs. And some people really go for bat for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Also, a lot of people are like, man, Infinite Wealth did a lot of the Rebirth stuff with like its mix of mini games and stuff like better than Rebirth. And I'm like, I wish I cared more about the subject matter to really see it, but I'm going to give it a shot. It feels like this year in particular, you know, how well reviewed Infinite Wealth was, that it maybe has a chance to show up in year-end rewards. Who knows? So I kind of want to still give it a shot, but then a lot of people kept saying, don't play Infinite Wealth if you haven't played, at the very least, the original Like a Dragon. So I'm like, okay, I have homework. So, and I know PJ loved those last two Yakuza games. So, at least, I don't trust him with many opinions, but when it comes to like those, I trust him a little bit more. He deserves he has my benefit of the doubt in those, when it comes to those games' opinions. So, we'll see. I'm curious to see how this show goes. And with that, that marks the end of both the news section and quick headlines for this week's episode of the X-Button. Let me read you the releases for the week of June 9th to June 15th. Now, the first game for this upcoming week is Rocket Knight Adventures Resparks, coming to PS5, PS4, and Switch and PC on June 11th. And I'm looking at this like apparently this is a game by Konami. I think it's like a platformer. So I don't think I've ever heard of Rocket Knight, but it's out on June 11th. So V Rising, the hit PC survival like Diablo style game that's about vampires that came out in May, now has its PS5 version launching quote unquote officially on June 11th. Just FYI, if you want to play that thing now, you can buy the Castlevania edition and start playing right now. It has like a 5-day early access period, and you get the Castlevania theme that is so perfect for that kind of game. We bought it with Paul yesterday, and because I was playing Final Shape, I haven't had the chance to try it, but I'm definitely gonna try it when I ran out of stuff to do for the Final Shape, which may take a while. Then there's Taskmaster VR coming to Quest 3, Quest 2, and PC on June 13th. Monster Hunter Stories and Monster Hunter Stories 2 Wings of Ruin coming to PS4, Switch, and PC for the first Monster Hunter Stories on June 14th, and then the PS4 version of Wings of Ruin also that same day. Why are they launching both Monster Hunter Stories games in the same day? Who knows? So, and then Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance, which is another version of Shin Megami Tensei 5, comes to PS5, Xbox Series X and S, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC on June 14th. So, again, we're kind of like, there's still games kind of coming out, but these are kind of like games that are being dumped in the middle of showcase season. I would say it's either a good way to kind of hide your game or a way for you to have something out when people are kind of like fiending for the games that were just announced, because there's always that post showcase depression of like, oh, those games look so cool, and now we have to wait for them to come out. So I know Paul has been playing V Rising and he loves it, so I trust him with that, and I definitely can't wait to try it, and we already have it now. So, and the Monster Hunter Stories, I just need to hear more about what exactly are they. Like Monster Hunter, my game was Monster Hunter World. Rise didn't quite click with me, but I also didn't play it at the right time and at the right mood, so I definitely kind of want to try it. So, and with that brings us to the end of this week's episode of the X-Button. That was a little chunkier than I expected it to be, but so are the episodes around this time of year. So, you can find me at _Drew Segovia on Twitter /X. You can find me at Alejandro Segovia 93 at Instagram /Threads. And you can find my written content, which my old content, you can find it over at thecriticalcorner.com, my own website, and then my current written content at seasongaming.com, where you can read my reviews for this year for The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered, Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, Skull and Bones, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Final Fantasy XVI The Rising Tide, TMNT Mutant Arcade, and Stellar Blade. So, I had promised that I was going to do a Paper Mario review, and now I'm still halfway through that game, and Destiny 2 has finally come to derail me. I don't know if it's still happening. So, it's a great game. It's an 8 out of 10, if you want to know. So, if you want me to give it like a score, if I would. So, great game. So with that, we reached the end of this week's episode, and I want to thank you so much for listening or watching. If you like what you listen or watch, give us a like, Give us a subscribe if you haven't, and leave us a review on your audio service platform of your choice. I would love to hear more about you as I continue this Paul-less trek as he continues his paternity leave until he returns late in January. So I'll definitely be looking to bring in more guests during this period because I definitely, like, as much as I enjoy doing solo episodes, I love having someone else to bounce off from also at the same time. So look forward to Eric coming back next week to continue our kind of like two-parter of our crossover when it comes to showcase season. And until next time, enjoy the summer. Now that we're like in the middle of the summer, hopefully you're not being like rained in like we currently are, where we get a lot of rain where we are. Enjoy, go touch some grass, play whatever games you may have in your backlog or that are happening right now, and press X to play. Hasta la vista, baby.